As I pour one out for my recently deleted Diablo 4 characters, who I spent dozens of hours nurturing and exploring alongside, I find it astounding that someone with my anemic attention span is still so excited to jump back in when the full version comes out in a couple short months. Having focused on the Druid and Necromancer classes during the second beta weekend, this one opened to more than just those willing to buy an appropriately unholy chicken sandwich.
For early beta access to Diablo 4.
I'm more convinced than ever that this hellish action RPG is on track to deliver something truly special. I continue to adore its build crafting system, the joy of spontaneous alliances that its online model allows for, and the surprisingly engaging combat, which was made even better with the new classes in play. We're back for round 2 of the battle with the Daughter of Hatred Lilith. And yes, folks who called me out last week, I do mean Daughter of Hatred, not Lord of Hatred Dol Mephistos, but his daughter, the Queen of Succubi and creator of Sanctuary. Sometimes I get confused. Anyway, the new classes, the Necromancer and the Druid, are already among my favorites right out the gate. The Necromancer is a maniacal commander of the undead, and mine felt immediately overpowered thanks to his gang of skeletal warriors that draw aggro, tank bosses, and deal decent damage. But once you gain other powerful abilities like the insanely deadly Bone Spear or the ability to make corpses explode, it becomes downright stupid. Every dead enemy becomes a resource to be spent expanding or healing your zombie army, or turned into an uber-powerful landmine, which in turn creates more corpses to be used. It's the circle of death. The fantasy of raising a private militia and making atrophy and death your wicked allies is wonderfully realized. And once I got aboard the dastardly train, the Necromancer was all I wanted to play. Fighting groups of enemies usually amounts to calling shots from afar, while your skeletal minions keep them busy, giving you plenty of time to use your most deadly powers. That becomes even more effective when paired with control abilities like Decrepify, which slows all enemies caught in its web to a crawl. It made each battle feel like I was a military captain calling shots from atop an overlook, smiling as the enemy fell before me. It's likely the Necromancer won't make it into the full game without a few nerfs, as evidenced by developers at Blizzard seemingly alluding to the class's insane power on Twitter. But I have to say, it's great that this class manages to feel exciting to play from the opening quest, rather than taking several hours before it starts to feel good like some others. Which brings us to the Druid, a nature-loving magic user who calls upon the powers of Mother Earth and can turn into vicious furry creatures for the purpose of mauling everything in sight. So basically, you're an Animorph. Unlike the Necromancer, the Druid took quite a while to really get going, and mostly feels similar to the Barbarian class because of their underwhelming mobility that means they usually don't do a ton of damage per second. In multiplayer, this doesn't matter much since you're able to distract the enemy while a DPS-focused friend lays on the pain, but playing solo is a pretty slow climb to feeling powerful. But while leveling up the Druid can be uneven, once you're properly equipped, it's still a complete blast. I mean, who doesn't want to instantly turn into a werebear and stomp a whole group of skeletons flat in an instant? Or summon a flock of sadistic crows to peck the flesh off your demonic foes? And since the Druid's powers have a lot more variety, both in terms of function and flavor, it avoids some of the issues I had while playing a Barbarian. Still, being a mostly melee class does feel like a disadvantage. Here's hoping both of these melee fighters are buffed to feel more like the melee rogue currently does. One concern I felt creeping up on me is that some of the novelty of the frigid Act 1 areas has diminished a bit after repeated play. To be fair, some of that is to be expected since I very much doubt that Blizzard designed the first chapter to be played through 5 times in 2 day-long marathons, so it's not surprising that I'm getting a little sick of this handful of quests and areas. But some of it is less forgivable, like how many dungeons reuse the same identical hallways, quest steps, and even bosses I fought only hours ago. Obviously, this is only a small taste of things to come with Diablo 4, but for a game whose predecessors are famous for hooking people in and getting them to spend dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of hours playing through the same areas with different characters, it's a little disappointing to see so much repetition in the opening act of that adventure. Perhaps Blizzard's live service ambitions will enable it to infuse those areas with more variety in the long term, but at least for now, it seems like completionists like me are in for quite a few samey encounters. The good news is that the build crafting and gear systems continue to carry the show, even when activities begin to feel uninspired. In my second weekend with Diablo 4's dense skill trees and loot, I've come to admire its complexity and variety even more, and spent a great deal of time trying different skill builds and gear loadouts. For example, I spent a couple hours comparing high-end loot from multiple world boss kills to reconfigure my rogue from a ranged character to melee, until I found the perfect cocktail of abilities and equipment to maximize my DPS. And I wasted way too much time trying out a bunch of different versions of my Barbarian in an ill-advised attempt to recreate Conan the Barbarian as accurately as possible. The real test of a build was bringing them to bear against the beta's world boss, Ashava, and seeing how quickly and efficiently I could fell the beast. Even with only 25 levels and what I assume is still limited access to the loot pool, tweaking my characters feels so darn good, and makes every class feel fresh again with each new experiment. As I said in last week's video though, I'm worried about what happens once that freedom is removed at higher levels. Will playing the same character with my abilities more or less locked in start to feel stale? I also remain deeply optimistic about Blizzard's decision to adopt an online service model with Diablo 4.
Greetings.
This weekend, I was able to spontaneously encounter other players out in the world and quest alongside them informally before officially inviting them to my group. In one case, that casual social interaction even turned into a new Xbox friend and member of my Diablo clan. It's very clear to me that this demonic adventure feels a whole lot better in the company of friends, and seeing it bring people together organically was absolutely awesome. Of course, I also experienced more lag and other online issues than before, which certainly highlighted the risk that accompanies the social benefits. One moment in particular, where I kept getting stuck in place, unable to interact with the world except when taking damage, definitely didn't feel good. But working out kinks like that are what a beta is for, and I think the Diablo universe stands to benefit enormously from embracing an online world. So, unless Blizzard announces another round of beta weekends between now and launch, that's a wrap on the beta impressions section of our review in progress. We'll be back with a final scored review closer to Diablo 4's June launch, once we've had a chance to see everything it has in store. Until then, you can hear more of my thoughts from the first beta weekend in case you missed that. Or watch some super busted Necromancer gameplay. And for everything else, you're already in the right place on IGN.